worked in Dennis Kucinich's campaign in 2004 and 2008. That's the presidential campaigns. And he is a staunch single-payer activist, and he has a campaign of his own that he'll tell you about. His name is Matt Reichel.
Thank you for having me. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me, and for everybody that came out, and for those of you that have stayed for the dramatic end here. I really appreciate that. As she mentioned, as she alluded to, I recently ran a Green Party campaign for Congress in the special election to replace Rombo Emanuel in Illinois' 5th Congressional District. And this kind of reminds me a lot of a lot of the forums we had, where they invited all the candidates from all three parties, and of course they stuffed us after all the Democrats, so by the time I got up there, everybody had either fallen asleep or left. Nonetheless, as she mentioned, I worked twice for Dennis Kucinich, so I'm willing to cross party lines on occasion, and I really appreciate all the work that Kucinich has done. He's one of the few men of principle in Washington, D.C. Most of my background is as a peace activist. I formerly worked with Peace Action as the regional organizer for the regional office here in Chicago. And I want to connect the issue of being an anti-war activist to this. I think there's two principal common elements between these issues, and they're greed and violence. The two great American epidemics of greed and violence. Greed insofar as the major health insurance companies have gotten away with running the most fantastic racket in the history of the criminal world. This is the same greed that sees military contractors, oil companies, and reconstruction contractors buy off the vast majority of the United States Congress so as to stay firm on a perpetual posture of war. A nation where the most vulnerable are not protected and where the most immoral are not checked. Where the uber-rich get bailed out and the working people get strung out. A country wherein power comes not to those who merit it through years of community service, but to those who purchased it with legal political bribes, otherwise known as campaign contributions. Of course, we know well about political corruption here in Illinois, though we should not be so facile to believe that Blagojevich is an isolated case. The reality is that until we have comprehensive election reform, all politics in the United States is pay to play. The going rate for congressional seats is now, if you want to be a member of Congress, is now over $1 million on average, $1 million that is essentially impossible to reasonably raise from well-intentioned citizen donors. So naturally, successful candidates from the two parties of Wall Street must accept these bribes or political contributions from big pharma, from the insurance companies, from military contractors. But I probably don't need to convince anybody here that greed is definitely behind this healthcare crisis. What I would like to further suggest is that this healthcare racket in America is a subtle form of violence. A violence that kills thousands of Americans each year. A violence that renders Americans thoroughly dependent on the masters of capital. A violence that destroys our higher human faculties, our ambition, our creativity, our rationality, our passion, our eccentricity, destroys all that makes humans great and turns us into pawns of the business class because you're dependent on your employer for your health care. As evidence of this, I point to the fact that by nearly all socioeconomic indicators, the U.S. trails the rest of the developed world. Life expectancy, infant mortality, overall quality of health according to the WHO, working conditions as measured by vacation time, leave time, maternal and paternal leave, overall hours worked, the right to unionize and collective bargain, the right to petition and protest. If you raise your voice for justice in this country, you are often disparaged and sloughed off as a coward. You are supposed to be a good little subservient American who just slaves away for the criminal corporate class that has steadily destroyed this republic. Well, I'm not the subservient type. And what we found when I ran for Congress in the special election to replace Rahm Emanuel was that my generation is done with being subservient to the goons and stooges that have governed this city, this state, and this country for time immemorial. And where are they today? Anybody else under 40 here? There's a couple up in the second row here. My generation, the great precarious generation of baby boomers' children, the generation without decent, reasonable jobs, without health care, without a culture of brother and sisterhood, without a foreseeable end to our wars of empire. We're done waiting for the baby boomers to finally lift this nation up. So we're going to do it ourselves. We're going to hold our heads high. And I recommend everybody do this. Lift your heads high. So often I see progressives and they seem shy. They seem afraid to speak truth to power. We can't be like that. We have to be confident in our convictions. Because a lot of this is not a question of left and right. If health care was a political issue, then every other developed country in the world wouldn't have some form of single-payer national health care. It is, and the Green Party has a saying, we're not left or right, we're in front. And that's how I like to think of my candidacy and my ideology. It is clear that the road to single-payer universal health care is replete with cumbersome obstacles and remains a long shot despite all that's changed in the last year. This is why, again, I ask that everyone stay strong, stay steadfast, stay united, stay active, stay out on the streets with signs and bullhorns, and stay attentive to the ballot box. Say, I will not vote for any tool that's taken one dime from an insurance company, because I don't need any more smoke blown in my face. Then with a little persistence, little perseverance, I'm confident that sooner rather than later, we will join the civilized world and institute a world-class system of single-payer universal health care. Thank you.